Hi everyone, this is Mr. Dawson, and I'm going to give you a quick lesson on 3 ways of responding to literature. In the lesson, I'm going to use the poem Introduction to Poetry by Billy Collins, which we read on one of the first days of school. So there's 3 terms that you'll need to know, and I'll come back to them as I go. But just to introduce them, they are literal. A literal response is a fact from the text stated directly. Inferential, which is not stated directly, but still has evidence. It's hinted or suggested or implied. It's something that you can assume. And the last one is critical. A critical response is an original thought or an opinion. It can be a connection or a question. You usually have to use literal and inferential responses to create your critical response. So let's look at how this might apply to Introduction to Poetry. The poem goes like this. I asked them to take a poem and hold it up to the light like a color slide, or press an ear against its hive. So I'll start off by making some literal responses. I see that here and here, Billy Collins is talking about the poem as if it's a person or an object that you can hold up or that you can listen to. Alright, so this is literally stated in the text because he says you have to hold it up to the light or press an ear against its hive. So again here, my literal response would be that Collins talks about the poem as if it was an object we can hold or listen to. As we keep going, it says, I say drop a mouse into a poem and watch him probe his way out, or walk inside the poem's room and feel the walls for a light switch. Now here, I'm going to make an inference. I'm going to talk about this line here and this line here. I'm inferring that Collins wants us to explore the poem because it might be unclear. So notice, this isn't stated directly, but because he mentions the mouse and walking inside the poem's room and feeling the walls for a light switch, those are things that happen when somebody doesn't know exactly what's going on. So that's an inference, and a pretty simple one. He says, I want them to water ski across the surface of a poem, waving at the author's name on the shore. Here, I'm going to make another inference. Now I infer that Collins wants us to enjoy the poem. I can infer this because he compares reading to water skiing and waving. Whoops, I'll go back a little bit. It's waving to people at the shore, which should be fun. Notice I just used evidence to make this response. It wasn't stated directly. Continuing on, he says, but all they want to do is tie the poem to a chair with rope and torture a confession out of it. They begin beating it with a hose to find out what it really means. Here I'll make my last 2 literal responses. Collins talks about the poem as if it's a human now. But now his tone has changed. He talks about doing dark, evil things to the poem. Instead of looking at it or listening to it. This is stated directly, right? Tie the poem to a chair torture it, and beat it. I'm not making any inferences, I'm just noticing exactly what is said. So this brings me to the last kind of response, which is a critical response. I'm going to put that in purple up here. If I think about the literal and inferential responses I've made, I notice a little bit of a shift. At first he talks about enjoying the poem, and he uses some positive sounding language. Towards the end, he talks about the poem as if it was a human being tortured or abused, because people are trying to find out what it really means. So overall, I might say something like this. Right? He wants us to enjoy and explore, but not take the analysis too far. So you can read my critical response on your own, but notice I've built off my literal and inferential responses in order to make this critical response. Okay, so that's it. For some of you this might be a review, while for some of you this might be new information. Jot down the 3 definitions that I mentioned earlier in the video, and if you'd like, you can open up the poem by just searching for it on Google, and you can make your own annotations as I've done here. Alright, thanks a lot. Feel free to put your questions below in the comments.